Greetings, I am Tom Earl. Welcome to the celebration. I know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here sharing your greatest gifts, your time, and your energy means the world to me. And as you might have seen, I am not alone. I have the amazing guest, the brilliant, the beautiful, and the married Adaora
Nwandu, soon to be Adaora Nwandu Earl.
There it is. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, my love. How are you?
Good. And do you mind doing a little intro? Tell the good folks out there about yourself.
Sure. I'm Adaora, and this is my husband-ish. And I am a director of film, TV, theatre, and television. I also write and produce, and I've been doing this for more decades than I care to admit. And generally speaking, I just believe in making everything a little bit better, be it the work that you see, the things that you watch, or just your general environment and the way you dress.
Yes, indeed. And you want to share with folks why you're here?
I'm here to ask Tom Earl some questions.
Yes. So, two things for you. One, I'm so used to saying, greetings, I am Tom Earl. And as you know, this is my year of courage that I almost had to do a retake. But it is no longer 2018, so it is no longer my year of courage. I'm still going to bring all the lessons learned from my year of courage into this year. But if you've been following along since the beginning, you know first it was my year of expression, and then it was my year of balance. Last year was my year of courage, and now this year is my year of spaghetti. No, I don't even like spaghetti. I just was trying to think of something goofy to say. It's my year of grace. This will be my year of grace. Just like last year, I'll be inviting my guests to share with us what grace means in their life. And in my own world, I'll be exploring it as well. Now, last year, I did almost exclusively interviews. Throughout 2019, I'm going to continue to bring you awesome people that I'm going to interview, but we're going to do some one-on-ones. We're going to do some Adaora asking questions. I'm going to have some other people on asking me questions, so you get a chance to kind of get to know me as well. What do you think about that?
I think that's not a bad idea, Tom Earl.
So let's jump right in. Let me share with you that these were questions people submitted to tomerl.com/ask, A-S-K. So if at any point throughout 2019 you want to submit a question, you can do so there, and you can let me know if you just want your first name, you want me to shout out your social, all of that's there. So to start us off, Adaora is going to ask a question of her own. And for the most part, I did not see these questions in advance. There's a couple questions that people didn't necessarily follow the rules all the way and texted me it rather than submitting it. So I don't want to make it sound like I didn't see any of the questions, but for the most part, these are questions that I either saw like 5 minutes ago when they texted me, or I haven't seen it all.
Okay, so I start with my own question, or I start with the question?
Yeah, we had talked about how we were going to start talking a little bit about grace.
Oh, in terms of grace, because I have another question.
Oh, you can ask that as well.
I'll save it to the end.
Okay.
There's so many things to choose from, and I know you came across lots of ideas for what this year would be. Why grace?
I don't know where grace came from. I don't remember exactly where I was, if I was walking, what I was doing, but I just know when I was reflecting upon what do I want it to be my year of, and there's a whole bunch of things that came up. And usually I take the whole month of January to just think about it, that there's a whole month where it's not even my year of anything. But when I started to think about grace and we talked back and forth about it, I thought, that is what I could use. Grace, whether you think of grace as the serendipity or those moments where you let go and let in, or grace as in gratitude, or grace as in prayer, or I think of grace as in like a figure skater or even like a boxer where there's that power and there's that work ethic, but there's just that nimbleness, that grace, all of that into these words. And I want to bring that energy into my life. As you know, I err on the side of workaholic.
Yeah.
And so I think of grace as kind of on the other end of that spectrum a little bit. So bringing some of that into my life is how I settled on that.
It was beautiful, but I also feel as if near the end of the year we started to see a few signs. Talking about boxing, we saw Creed 2. We both kind of have different feelings about that, but I won't get into that. But earlier in the day, we'd seen something where there was Amara, or Amara, as I would call it. And I mentioned it to you, and I said, "Oh, that's an Igbo Nigerian word, and it means grace." And then we went on to see Creed 2, and what would he name his daughter but Amara? And I don't know if he means it in the same way, but again, that's a name that's very common in Igbo, and it means grace. So it just felt as if grace was following you and kind of resonating.
I totally forgot about that. And I bet there was been a million little things like that happened leading up to me making that decision. And that's why I always try to write those things down. Otherwise, I never remember them. Or almost never.
Okay. Shall we dive into the questions?
Let's do it!
Let me see. The first question is from Shania Whitaker. And she is at shaniawiththeblog.com. She wants to know, probably a question for both of us, when are the babies coming?
I'm trying to think what she submitted this question to. Well, what can we talk about?
We can say that, as with maybe the theme of this year, grace and letting go and seeing what happens, babies will come when the babies decide that they want to come in this direction, I figure. But you may have a different philosophy about it.
I think that might be you graduate high school. Where are you going to college? You graduate college. Where are you going to work? You get a job. When are you getting married? You get married. When are you having kids? Once I have kids, I wonder what the next one's going to be. They probably give you like 20 years and then say, when am I going to get grandkids?
Exactly. If you become the one asking the questions.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So, yes, we do want to have kids.
Yes.
And which we've talked about. That had not been something I wanted to have. I did not want to have kids. And so it's a new development in my life. And I was listening to, I've been really into this podcast called Jocko, Jocko, Jocko podcast. And he's a former Navy SEAL. So it's kind of a type of content and a background that I don't normally, like mostly I'm listening to like women-centered podcasts. Not to say there's not women Navy SEALs. But it's rarely about like, lifting weights and like these kind of things. And Jocko talks about way more than just lifting weights and making him sound like a meathead. But somebody asked him, is this Navy SEAL who most highly decorated Navy SEAL battalion that fought in Iraq, like this kind of a guy, what does it mean to you, or what are things you've done where you felt like a man? And he was like, to me, being a man doesn't mean you are like a peacock or a blowfish. But he named some things. One of the things he names is when he had kids, that felt like, okay, this is something I can do. And so he framed things more in like, first thing was, I've always wanted to serve my country in battle, but you never know what happens until you're there. And then once I did, I was like, this is something I can do. And another one was like, I've always wanted to get married, but I didn't know if I would. And then I got married. Another one was like, I've always wanted to have kids. And then he had kids. And I thought about that I think that's always one of these things that people wonder is, like, would I be a good parent? Is this something that I could actually do and do a good job of? So that was curious when he said that I thought too, like, yeah, I think that's a rite of passage, or for a lot of people for many, many years, that's been a thing that, like, you have kids.
But it's also, I don't know if the frame works for me. For example, I want to fight for my country. You do a battle. If you get through the battle and you survive, and hopefully don't shame yourself or your country, yes, you've done that and you've ticked that box. But with marriage, anyone in theory could get married. You see people getting married online with people that they've never met. So is that just enough to tick the box, or is there some way to measure that you've done it well? And then also with him having kids, yeah, he managed to pop kids out. What sort of frame is he using to measure whether he has done it well or not? Or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's just the having of the kids. But it's an interesting way to frame things and think about them.
Well, I'm not doing a good job of translating what he was saying, so I highly recommend you listen to it for yourself, because I'm butchering everything he says, and I hope, if people were to take like a 3-minute segment of here and explain it in like a terrible way, and someone's like, I don't know about that Tom Earl guy, I wouldn't be happy. So all I'm trying to say is I resonated with, inside of me, it's always been this thing I wondered if I could actually be good at. It's like, well, do I want to have kids? It's a crazy world. I'm really dedicated to my work. Would I even be around enough? If I had kids and I was always on tour, out speaking, like, would that actually be responsible to still bring kids into this world knowing that? Or, I think that, like any parent, you always wonder, am I going to do a good job? And so it's always been a thing in the back of my mind of, yeah, like, that is a box that I'm curious to, or a measurement, a gauge internally that I resonated with, of being a father and actually doing a good job. That I think doing a good job is something that's like a confidence builder, but an internal confidence builder, not like I feel confident. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I think I do. Thank you. Next question. It's from Yusuf.
All right.
And he says, you're soon to be a married man. What are you most looking forward to in married life with the wonderful Adaora?
A lot of theme. There's a theme going on here. What am I most looking forward to? I feel like we already kick ass. So I don't know if there's anything that I'm looking forward to. I can say that for me, when we were dating, even though we were committed and living together and making all these long-term plans together, that on a subconscious level, there is a different level of commitment I feel now that we are actually like married. You know what I mean? Or we got married in Nigeria and we're about to get married here. That sometimes when things might come up, I would think, like, well, let's work through it. But a part of me was like, like, we don't have to go too hard on this because, if we break up, I'll just make sure that this isn't an issue with the next person. And so once we got married or engaged, it was like, no, this is it. Like, there is no other person. There's no, I'll get it. I'll just make sure that this person doesn't do this thing where we butt heads with the next time around, because the goal is not to have it next time around. I've been listening to this podcast every morning. So the other thing that was interesting they talked about is, like, when you get married, like, that whole, like let's just say animalistic thing of trying to attract a mate is like done. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still going to look good and do all those kind of things for you, but I'm no longer, like, nothing I do, even if on a subconscious level before, was to at the same time like meet somebody. Like, that's done. I'm not out here trying to meet somebody. So, like, I spent 31 years of my life looking for somebody to either marry or spend a long time with, whereas that part of my life is done. And so I'm curious to know, as my mindset shifts more and more, how maybe my behaviors change on a subconscious and conscious level, because now it's about, like, not like us. And me out in the world and things I do and relationships I have, that won't be a part of it at all.
That's true. I'm curious to see if that shifts for you as well, because I do feel like you've been such a committed person in this relationship that a lot of your actions have been shaped to ways to make me happy. So I wonder if anything that was elsewhere in you, that was perhaps trying to make yourself more attractive generally, will be channeled into that, because you're already kicking it such a high level and just making sure you look so hot for me, the way you look after the house, the skills you've been acquiring. It's just always been a joy and a pleasure for me to just see how much work you put towards my happiness.
I don't remember. It was not a date. It was like an in-between date where like you randomly decided to meet me at a poetry show. It was right after I cut my hair. And we went to like a Thai restaurant, and we still weren't. I still hadn't convinced you that it was worth rolling the dice on. But you had talked about that love you first feel when you get together, where it's like really exciting and that kind of stuff, and then that what the love feels like. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years later. And I was thinking, you know, a lot of people that perpetually date or cheat, like get addicted or think that that first feeling of love where you're like, I'm not sure, do they like me, do they not? And then the moment where you're like, we both do, oh my gosh, I just want to hug you, I just want to be around you, I'll drive around with you on Uber, and like all of that kind of stuff. Like, I always want to be around you. You know, that kind of like, that newness goes away. Especially when it's like you start balancing bills together. And I really think that another reason that people cheat or all these others kind of things is when you have to start sacrificing things for each other. There's only enough time, money, resources, energy to do one thing today. Is it going to be my thing, your thing, our thing? What is it? The more and more you have to do that initial where you didn't have to make very many sacrifices to be together, it starts to become something different. But I was thinking that you can still get those little moments. And when we were trying to pick the wedding song, we were going to walk up the aisle, which means when you're leaving, down is when you're coming in, as we learned. And we were picking the song, which I won't give away. When we both listened to it and we both got a little teary-eyed, I felt that initial puppy dog love. I was thinking, oh, this is one of those moments that you get in a long-term marriage where you do get to still experience those moments where you feel almost like the love is just happening. And so I guess I look forward to all those moments where it's surprising and we knew it was coming, we didn't know, all those moments where you get to feel that freshness amidst that committed foundational love.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Next question is from Sadia.
Okay.
What's the most difficult decision you have ever made professionally?
The most difficult decision I've ever made professionally. The reason I'm pausing is because I'm trying to rank what would be difficult. Because there's a lot of them.
Maybe some of the ventures that you've gone into with people professionally, and not necessarily seen as professional, but that you had to decide to walk away from. That might be one of them. Or
I guess I can't think of the most. That's what's hard. So let me say a couple difficult decisions. Or I guess this one wasn't difficult, but it could have been. When I first got here, first got to LA, I had about 15 days to find a place and find a job. And I managed to pull it off. And it was a job where when I was doing AmeriCorps, I was making about $10,000 a year. And this job was $30,000 a year. So $20,000 jump. But I hated it. It was a great place. Amazing people. It was nothing about them. It was all about me. I had to get up early, which now I get up early all the time. But at that point, it drove me crazy. It was like a 60-hour work week. I had to drive an hour and 15 minutes. There's a lot of things that just weren't my thing, even though they're super amazing and I still donate to them. And so I decided to go from that $30,000 to back to a job where I'd be making about like $10,000, $12,000, where I went from a place where I had like my own place to sharing a garage with somebody. So while that on the surface seemed like a difficult decision, it was super easy. So I guess I'm not answering the question. I'm answering what people might perceive as difficult. I think some difficult moments professionally where I was at a place where I was working where that was promoting inclusion, and I started to experience explicit moments of Islamophobia. And I brought that to the HR, and they didn't believe me. They thought I was exaggerating or bringing it up, or like that maybe I wasn't getting the full picture, and they weren't going to do anything about it. and it was a place I really loved to work, and more of those things started to happen. And so maybe deciding to leave that place, that was probably a difficult decision.
Yeah. But once you did.
I think firing people is always tough. I think it's really important to fire people.
Yeah.
So important. That kills culture so quickly when you find out there's no consequences because the boss is afraid to fire people. So that's always been hard. I think a time where it was difficult decisions was I was at a place where it was a youth development, and there was about almost a 1.5 month onboarding process for the youth to kind of make sure people were fully committed.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the young people, if they didn't make it through that onboarding process, some of the consequences were like you went back to jail. And some of like real jail, like some of the kids were 20, 21. And I was kind of new to that kind of part of the work. And I had come from a background that was more that you never kick kids out of the classroom. You never say, no, we're going to fight until the end to find common ground. And I found a lot of kids would like whip up the tears, or they would kind of lean into, well, they're always going to want to dialogue with me more. And so they never held themselves accountable. And so it was tough to learn that, and the more and more I talked to young people who did get told no and had to go back to jail or something like that, and they realized that they were kind of being full of shit. And so when they came back the second time, they were the best students, became teachers, started a family. Yeah. So I learned that while I don't believe that jail redeems anybody, I do think that accountability of, where I was like these tears right now, I feel you, but you're faking it, aren't you? Yes. And some of the social workers are like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. They're like, all right, I'm faking it. I know y'all fall for it when I do this. And it's like, that person really does have a terrible past, but they were using it to manipulate us and holding them accountable. So it's like having to actually make those decisions. And I remember I went from that job where I was making those kind of decisions of, should I make this, send this kid back to jail or not? I went to this other job where parts of the job were complex, but your everyday part was you would kind of sit there and help people ask if they had any questions. And they were like, okay, this part of the training is complex. Are you ready? They're like, yeah. They're like, so what you need to do is when the movie ends, you got to watch for it. When the movie ends, you got to get up, and there's 3 movies you choose from. You pick one, and you push start. Do you get it? And I started laughing so hard, I started crying. I was like, do you think this is tough?
On that note, we'll move on to the next question. Oh my goodness. Next question is from Manza.
Okay.
How do you manage the stress of working, running your own business, and yet stay upbeat, optimistic, and motivated in what you do?
Okay, can you ask it again?
Sure. Manza wants to know, how do you manage the stress of working, running your own business, and yet stay upbeat, optimistic, and motivated in what you do?
This is, I would say, routines and discipline. That you have to have routines and discipline. When I start to let my solely run on my gut or emotions, then I end up working like a maniac.
Yep, I can testify to that completely.
That's my default, working like a maniac. And instead, I need to be disciplined about the time I get up and when I get up, what I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll wake up and, let me just check one thing. And next thing you know, a half hour's gone by, and then maybe you wake up and then you ask me a question. And next thing you know, I'm 2 hours into the day. And I started the whole day playing catch up versus the night before I lay out my shoes. I lay out my clothes. I'm going to go outside. I have my keys, my headphones. I've already decided the podcast I'm going to listen to. Everything's decided. So as soon as I wake up, boom, there's the banana. I eat the banana. Shoes on, boom. I walk for that half hour. I come back, and everything happens, I
think that very well answers the question of how you balance it and how you keep everything going. But speak a little bit more about where your optimism and your upbeatness comes from.
I was going to go to, and I think this helps, working out's a huge one for me, especially group fitness classes and especially group fitness classes where we're high-fiving each other and we're like hooting and hollering, like woo, like those kind of things, and like yelling. I think as adults that there's very few opportunities we have to just yell and like yell for joy or yell. Like, you remember at recess, if you go out to a recess of young kids, they're just literally yelling the whole recess.
You're giving me some insight into your psychology.
Because there is something fun about just being like, ah, woo, this is awesome, yeah! About just being loud and I'm not like, we need that as human beings.
I don't know. Some of us need that as human beings.
I think a disproportionate amount of humans need it. That's why I think like people are so into sports. Because every Sunday, it's socially acceptable to like yell for joy. It's like, oh my God, we scored! We scored! Woo! You know, like where else in a person's life is it socially acceptable as an adult to do that? Maybe a concert. You can do it at a concert.
You can. A lot of yelling tends to just give me a headache. But I was thinking maybe when we go somewhere like our places of worship and we're singing at the top of our voices, I do get the pheromones and the endorphins from singing beautiful songs loudly as opposed to plain yelling. So maybe it's the same kind of thing.
And there are some places of worship where people go all in. Poetry, so. You can yell during poetry, concerts. But if I was in the morning, I'd be like, it's really good for me to just yell excitedly. And I went into the park and was like, woo! It's the best year ever! People would call the cops. They would be like, what is this? This is not socially acceptable.
But it's LA, baby. I think people would just think it was the way.
It's like Coming to America, where he yells over the balcony. So that I like, working out, not only the chemically releases endorphins, but I get to connect with people. In terms of optimism, I think I am hardwired for optimism. I think that's something that I have from little things along the way in life, that I'm an optimistic person. I think maybe it's a ownership thing. Being optimistic makes me feel in control. I think that there was a time in my life where I just surrounded myself with lots and lots and lots of negativity, thinking it was helping me, and I ended up getting a huge backache, couldn't even move. And one of my mentors said that you have to have, her name's Diane Burby, she said you have to have what's called the paradigm of transformation. And that is, what is your model and your belief in people's ability to change?
Okay.
And she's saying, you can't do this kind of work unless you truly can articulate your belief in people's ability to change. And mine is, I believe, when you get people involved in the process of dialogue, true, deep, meaningful dialogue, everybody can change.
Yeah.
And I'm going on and on. Felt you kick me. I didn't know if that was to wrap it up.
No.
Okay. So one more thing. I was going through Tumblr.
Yes, wrap it up.
Okay, I was going through Tumblr, and there's this guy named Abdul, and we can link in the show notes what his actual handle is. And he was saying, I love seeing how quickly I can change people's opinions of me, because he must get a lot of hate mail. So somebody inboxed him and was like, you're a piece of shit, you effing P word, okay? And you should just die. And so is a white guy, and this guy's Muslim. And so, clearly motivated by Islamophobic racism. And so he responds to him and says, you have a really nice profile picture. I see your teeth are really white. How do you get your teeth so beautifully white? The guy responded, I'm not usually this mean, I'm just sick. Sorry about that. And he said, my girlfriend really likes my teeth white, so she buys the toothpaste. I don't know what it is. And then he responds and says, I use chewing charcoal. And he's like, it gets all in between your teeth, but it makes your teeth really white. And the guy responded, by the way, I really love your beard. Like, I wish I could have that cool facial hair. He's like, where can I get the charcoal? He's like, you can just get it over the counter at CVS. The guy's like, I'm going to look into it. And once again, sorry for coming at you like such a jerk.
Wow.
And I guess that to me demonstrates I've seen it happen so many times.
Yeah, just a little connection. And definitely need to have that in the show notes.
That's what keeps me optimistic. Okay, go ahead.
Next question's from Bob.
Okay.
Please.
That's my sister.
Yes. Elizabeth, When you have worked hard to improve something about yourself and there's a trigger to revert back to a former pattern, what steps do you take to move forward?
That's a good one. I really think of that it doesn't, my mind's going in so many directions. The Viktor Frankl quote, man's last remaining freedom is his ability to choose his attitude. Mm-hmm. So I think the taking full ownership that no matter what does happen, I'm responsible, me personally, Tom Earl, for my reaction. And honestly, a lot of it is that I know that I can go from like a calm state of mind to annoyed, pissed off, mad, holding a grudge, blaming everybody else. I can go that quick, and I can revert into self-doubt, self-loathing, all those things. I can go back to that this quick, especially if it's something that's a big area, like my sister said, a trigger. I can go back to that this quick. And so I'm literally just bombarding myself 24/7 with podcasts and music and lectures that are training my mind the opposite. I mean, all day. I wake up, I go for a walk, I'm listening to something. I get up from my computer at work to, go for a 5-minute walk, I'm listening to something.
Okay, and that, I can testify, works a large extent with you. But it's, can you share a bit more about that aspect of taking responsibility for however it is you are and what your attitude is? Say, for example, you are triggered and you do find yourself going back to those spaces and acting out. How do you then refresh and dial back and take responsibility for that and move on from that?
Yeah, I think, one thing is if something really crazy's happened and it's just knowing that there's no podcast, there's no anything that's going to get me to go from this 100 I'm at to back to like an even neutral, and just riding that storm, but knowing that I'm not in my normal mind right now, that I'm in an elevated place of anger, frustration, blame, and that my angry thoughts are only going to invite more angry thoughts. But it's like I've jumped out of the airplane, I'm plunging, I can try to pull the parachute, but I'm already too deep. And so there's no stopping this anger right now until I do something like work out, eat something, and go to sleep. And then when I wake up, now I have the choice of, am I going to remind myself of how pissed off I was yesterday, or do I want to try to start the day fresh with it calmed down a little bit more? And that might look like, when I go for the walk, listening to something that reminds me and says, hey, Tom, like, you're in control of who you are. Blaming somebody else is literally you just trying to pass the buck. Are you that kind of person? No, I'm not that kind of person. And so for me, walking through that can then have me go through my own steps again of I'm in control of how I feel. Blaming somebody, as Brene Brown says, is just shifting discomfort. Then asking myself as I'm walking, what discomfort am I trying to shift?
Which all makes sense. And I think that covers a part of the question. But say, for example, if you find that in this anger spiral, you have done lots of damage, and so there are people blaming you, how do you then either make amends or clear the slate or move forward to forgive yourself and invite forgiveness from other people?
So when I was mad, the way I reacted caused damage around me. I mean, I think I really believe in the approach of actually approaching the person and conflict mediating. I've found that because so many people don't take ownership and participate in either blame or avoidance, then when you actually come to somebody and say, wow, I really did mess up, and here's how I messed up, and here's how I would like to, I'd like to work through this with you, and I know that I've broken your trust, how can we resolve it? I find that 9 times out of 10, people are willing to take that first step with you.
I think that's a very helpful response.
Well, thank you. Good question, Bumps.
Next one is from Moses.
Moses!
Mosey. Why are you motivated to do race equity work, and how do you go about open conversations with resistant white folks? Moses being a white folk who is not resistant.
That first question has been one people have been asking me since I've started to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And really the question is that why do you as a white guy care? Because the default is that you don't care. And so I've always tried to think of that. What put me on the path towards caring? I mean, my mom's a social worker, and my dad is, ever since a young age, I remember a couple of things. We went out to a restaurant that one of his gay friends owned, and he would share stories with us that one time the guy was getting, this was in the 50s, the guy was getting beat up in the bathroom. And so my dad jumped in and defended him. And he didn't tell us until many years later that he didn't win that fight. He also got his ass kicked. Which I think would make it even better.
Honestly, even better story.
And then he'd be like, and everybody thought that I was gay because I stood up for the guy. But he didn't say this but the message was, but fuck them. You know what I mean? So you hear that, or I remember one time people were making fun of a Mexican person in the United States who was running a dentistry out of his house. And he got arrested for it. And the DJ disc jockeys were making fun of him. And I was like, after I drop you kids out, I'm going to go there and beat them up. They don't get it. He's real dentist. The degree doesn't transfer.
That is so
It's a real dentist. And so people don't have money. Instead of not going to a dentist, they go to him. And he is a real dentist. I'm going to go beat them up. And I think of how many kids in this small town I was from were riding with their kids laughing. Like, oh my God. And I didn't have those parents. I had parents who are always like, do the right thing. Do the right thing.
Which makes sense, and it explains some of your formative psychology. I think the thing is, though, yes, social justice makes sense. But to go so deep into race equity work, why that specifically? I know your dad worked with people from the Latino community for decades, so you grew up around that. But you went beyond that. So how did you find your way there?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that gave me that. So if you think of an 18-year-old Tom, 19-year-old Tom, I think it gave me that initial push. I think punk rock was super political and all about anti-war and anti-racism. And because so many punk rockers are stereotyped as being white supremacists, because white supremacy and punk rock, there's so much punk rock. Like, I remember when we were little kids or 16-year-olds, we'd have songs that were like, fuck the KKK, fuck white power. We'd be in the basement, like, recording the backup vocals, just like, fuck white power. And then in college, I majored in Africology, which, I don't think of myself just as within the framework of race, because they brought like an intersectional perspective before we even were talking about intersectional and pop culture. I would say the reason why I talk about race so much is because it's one of the biggest hurdles. So, for instance, I was working with educators for many years. We trained about 3,600 educators with a team. Most of the educators were white. And so the thing they're going to be their biggest barrier is race. And so getting as many tools as I could, which I think is the second part of his question, which is what?
How do you continue to have open conversations with resistant white folk?
The best way, honestly, is to get them involved in some sort of process. And so you really got to be mindful, for me, that I've never had a white person, I've never changed a resistant white person or a resistant homophobic person or a resistant sexist or Islamophobic. I've never changed somebody's resistance by debating them. I'm just not good at that. I've never changed their opinion by throwing stats or linking a million articles in the comments. I've never changed that's never been. It's always been the conversation we then have, the dialogue. And oftentimes through asking questions. Mm. And of course, asking questions in a way where I'm trying to get them to realize things. Mm-hmm. One, for example, would be, let's say I'm working with teachers who are, for the most part, white women. Yeah. And we're trying to talk about privilege, and people are saying, I've earned everything I had. I'm a poor teacher. How are you going to tell me that I don't have privilege? And then I'd say, one of my favorite things to do is to run at night. I love it. 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, I love just running in the streets. And I'd be like, do any of y'all do that? And most women would be like, you jerk. I am a woman. I would like, I'm worried about getting assaulted. I would never do that. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, so, it sounds like there's things that I can do that you can't and I don't even think about it. And what do you think would happen if I was a black man running in your neighborhood at 10 o'clock at night? How do you think that would go? And so using their own reflection of, I can't do certain things you can because you have privilege over me, as a bridge to them getting to think about, well, what about it? What are things you can do as a white woman that a black man or a black woman or a woman of color, man of color can't do, or would get resistance?
Okay.
And so using questions to get people to reflect upon their own experience, then using that experience as a bridge to a new concept.
Helpful. Well done, my love.
Well, thank you.
This question is from Anonymous.
Oh, Anonymous. There's a lot of good quotes from Anonymous.
How do you not let social media stress you out when job bookings are based on the number of followers?
Social media business development question. Whenever we go to parties, and as much as I seem outgoing, I don't like going to large social gatherings where I don't know people. I'd rather stay home and read. So when I do go to them, my goal is to find one person that I can talk to about social media or business development. It's like my goal. Oh, I found somebody. Let's talk. And I can pass the time that way. So I love this question. The thing to think about with any social media is, yes, we could acknowledge that if you were to have 100,000 followers or 50,000 followers, whether that gig is you're an actor, whether that gig is you are trying to be an influencer and you're going to brands and saying, pay me to post your stuff, whatever that might be, yes, having those 100,000 or those extra followers does give you leverage. I'm not going to deny that. However, what you do find is there's lots of people who have 50,000, 100,000, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, but all of those followers are sand. They're not real followers. Either people got them by buying them, which is spam and doesn't count, or they did other spammy things like follow, unfollow, which is spam, or they had a robot like people's posts automatically and follow, unfollow them automatically. All these things are spam, and you should feel bad if you're doing them, but I'd still like to dialogue about it with you, but you should never do that, it's spam. Whatever it might be. If your followers, if the people who are following you aren't actually your real audience, you didn't earn them by being authentically yourself and storytelling and actually building relationships with people, when you do get that gig based upon those followers, or when you do get that gig and you become an influencer, whatever that is, and then you're hired because of you seem like you have influence, it seems like you have an audience, and you get into the job and you do your thing and they're like, okay, promote, get out there, and you post your post and you only get like the same amount of likes as somebody who has 2,000 followers, but every single one of those 2,000 followers actually engages with them, they're going to realize that it's just, you have this whole empire made of sand. You have these followers made of sand. And so you can't get lost in the likes. You can't get lost in the follower count. As hard as it is, you can't get lost in it, because it's not just about how many followers you have, it's about who's following you. So I'd rather have 500 followers, and all of those are actually people that I'm building a meaningful relationship with, who actually, I come across their mind, they actually want to engage with me and ask me questions, because when you have an actual relationship with somebody, that's when they want to work with you. Or they hear somebody say, somebody that does have influence. You never know if any of those people are friends with someone like Ava DuVernay, and they hear her saying, oh, I'm doing this new project. Like, oh, I know this person. They're super awesome. You should talk to them. That's going to go a lot farther, that word of mouth, somebody vouching for you, even if you only have 500 followers, then you do a blind audition or you blindly submit a job resume and they're like, oh, that's cool. They have 1 million followers.
And then sometimes something just needs to be interesting on its own. It doesn't matter how many followers. Like my friend's husband, or my friend herself, took a picture of her daughter dressed as Michelle Obama during the the Princeton era. Her husband posted it on Twitter. He has a handful of followers. I don't know if it's even up to a few hundred. And this picture went viral because people thought it was cool. And he had no followers, and then it was all over the news. And now the Instagram pages have dozens and hundreds and thousands of likes. It's just creating content that's interesting enough covers. It doesn't even matter how many followers or likes you have initially.
You nailed it. 2 things I want to add on this, then we'll stop, I promise. 1, when you start posting with the sole intention of that externalness of likes, followers, shares, that kind of stuff, there's a tendency, and I've done it, we've all done it, and we might be still doing it, there's a tendency to start posting or creating content to that lowest common denominator of what can I do to get the likes? And it starts to become less and less authentically who you are and more just trying to be like, if I do this, historically, human beings, it catches their attention. And so therefore, I'm going to do or be or say or act like this because it'll get me the followers. And you're building a career where eventually you're going to end up being like, I hate my life. I hate myself. I hate this career I've built it. Second thing is the whole point of social media is to cut out the middle person, is to cut out the gatekeepers. So if there's somebody, whether it's a casting director, a record label, a job that you want to do, any of these things that won't give you access because either they're a jerk, they're racist, they're a bully, or they want these superficial things like a follower count. The whole point of social is that you're storytelling and expressing and building relationships in a way that you can just cut those people out because you're building your own audience. Like Issa Rae did. Issa Rae cut out the middle person until the middle people and the gatekeepers came to her.
Okay, with that.
Adora's pulling me off the stage. All I'm trying to say is, be yourself.
I did promise I'd ask my question.
Oh.
You have 30 seconds to answer it.
I can't promise that I'll do that, but go ahead.
So, my love, where did you learn all your boy band hands from?
What do you mean, like expressing myself?
Your boy band hands. It's like a boy band music video watching you sometimes.
Really?
Yes.
I think it comes from facilitating. When you're put in a room with 100 middle school students, and all you're given to entertain them is a circle full of chairs, and you see the teachers kind of like chuckling, like, good luck. And they're like, yeah, teach them not to bully. And they basically like lock you in this gymnasium. And you're trying to do whatever you can to get them to be engaged. I remember sometimes I'd be huddled at lunchtime with my co-facilitator. And literally kids would be jumping over us and literally climbing the walls. That you learn very quickly, you got to do whatever you can to pull people in. And I think one of the subconscious things is, if maybe me moving my hands draws you in, if me pointing or doing my hands is the thing that you're that kind of learner that needs to see that kind of movement, I think that you just start to throw the kitchen sink when you're explaining. And I think that the hand movements is probably one of those things.
Great answer. Thank you, Earl.
You're welcome.
And I think that rounds up our Q&A session for today.
Yes, this was so much fun. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure. It was very graceful.
So if you enjoyed this, let me know if you'd like to see more of these. If you have feedback, if you're like, Tom, this would have been great if you just kept the answers to 30 seconds. Keep that to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. Let me know. But if you'd like to submit questions, go ahead to do so. TomEarl.com/ask. I'll attempt to do this maybe every other month or something like that. We'll see. But it's lots of fun, so keep them coming. TomEarl.com/ask. This has been such a pleasure. All the show notes are going to be TomEarl.com/Q&A1, because this will be the first Q&A. All the show notes, TomEarl.com/Q&A1, including how you can let Adaora know how she did such an amazing job. Anything you want to add?
I think that's it. Thank you.
We always end with an invitation. Do you want to end with what you'd like to invite people to do, consider, be, think about?
Yeah. I'd like you to consider the space for grace in your life. And if you don't feel like you have much of it for yourself, to start finding ways to bring it into the way you treat yourself.
Wonderful. And as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at TomEarl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.